Welcome, my friends, to the latest edition of Here's What We Know, the podcast of unexpected conversations. And I have to tell you today I'm a little nervous. I'm just a little nervous. They reached out and said, how would you like to talk to Thant Myint-U, who's just written the book Peacemaker, about his grandfather, Thant Myint-U, who's the Secretary General of the United Nations during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I'm all of a sudden going, wow, he sounds really smart. And that's going to be a challenge. But I'm going to jump in. Thought, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I have to tell you this straight off the bat. Tell this to all my guests. It doesn't hurt my feelings if you tell me I'm wrong.
Okay.
Okay? So if I've got something way wrong, just go,
absolutely.
Hold up, partner.
Okay.
We need to reconnoiter.
Okay, I'll do that.
First of all, it's the book about your grandfather.
That's right.
How well did you know him? Did you know him? And I say that because I did not know my grandparents. They were all of them were passed before I was born. Did you know him?
Yeah, because my parents, so he's my mother's father, and my parents lived with him in the 1960s when he was head of the UN. So I was born in 1966 when he was UN Secretary General. And so I grew up in his house. When he left the UN at the end of 71, I was 5. When he died in 1974, I was 8, almost 9. So I knew him. I didn't discuss global politics with him, but I knew him as my granddad, swimming, playing around in the house, things like that. I have memories of that very, very clearly.
You and I share that connection. My one grandmother was alive, but she died when I was 8. So I can tell you certain things about her. I can remember a couple of things, but I don't remember anything like my brothers and sisters and cousins.
Yeah, I have images of him. I mean, very clear images of him. And I remember specific scenes and things, but I can't remember conversations or anything like that I might have had with him.
How old were you when you found out that, oh my God, he was Secretary General of the UN, right? I say that because I do a lot of country stars and stuff like that. And I remember asking like Tim McGraw one time, when did your daughters figure out you were Tim McGraw?
Yeah.
And he goes, they probably weren't, they were probably 10, 11, 12 years old before they ever understood, okay, what dad does is weird.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't really until after he died. So when I was in my teens and things, I had a sense of what the UN was and everything else. I always knew there was something special because it was rare that we would go and visit him in his office. And I think it must have been one of my really earliest memories. Maybe I was 4 years old when we went into the city because we grew up outside. Our house was outside of New York. We went into the city. I remember driving down the FDR Drive through that tunnel, seeing that huge UN building, the skyscraper, the secretariat, going up into his office. And that must have been the day when he was hosting the Apollo 11 astronauts when they came back from the moon. And what I remember from that is not so much the astronauts, but I remember this big map with lots of bright lights and things behind when we were all, because I've seen the picture of us all standing there, but I remember the map and the lights, not Neil Armstrong and the others.
Isn't that crazy? The fact that my son asked me one time, he goes, have you ever met Steph Curry? And I said, yeah. And you want to know something crazy? He goes, what? I said, you met him too. You were with me, but you were only like a year and a half old. And you have the same thing. You met Neil Armstrong.
Yeah.
You don't remember it.
I remember the map. I remember the lights in the map.
Because that's what somebody would remember. And you decided to write this book, which, by the way, is fascinating.
Thank you.
And the truth of it is, and you point this out in the book, Thant Myint-U has been forgotten
U Thant.
a lot.
Yeah.
U Thant, I'm sorry. U Thant has been forgotten and he played this pivotal role in truly the history of the world. Your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the reason I decided to write the book. I never thought I would write a biography or anything about him. I started looking at the archives, which had been declassified, digitized. I realized that, not only was he a kind of prominent figure in the 60s, which I always knew, but that he really played this pivotal role in things like the Cuban Missile Crisis, and that it had been kind of left out of the history books, the popular books that we have today. And I wondered why. And so I wanted to know more. And that was the origins of the book. And so then I discovered a lot about his backstory, why he became Secretary General, the challenges he had. And then I tried to pull it together into this missing piece of the puzzle in terms of our world history, which I really think helps to explain a lot about where we are today as well.
I love the backstory. All of us, everybody has this amazing story, but we don't think it's amazing because it's ours, right? I mean, you lights. Mean the Apollo 11 restaurant, lights, right? Well, because we remember what we remember. And when you found out about it, when I read about it, that he came from this small town in Burma that was just a collection of wood huts, and here and now, and he was a school teacher until he was what, almost
Almost
40 years
40.
old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm deciding that I'm gonna go, I've done this long enough. I'm gonna try my hand at something else. What are you gonna do? I'm thinking diplomacy. Wait, why? I mean, how did as you learned about him first, was there any surprises? What were you surprised? Anything about it? I love the fact as a cigar aficionado myself, I love that you start the book off with him having a cigar, listening to John Lennon and Yoko Ono sing Imagine. I love that.
I mean, many things, right? So, I mean, I guess in a couple of ways, I still, even after writing the book and thinking about this for many years, it's still hard for me to reconcile a person sitting in that town, which I've been to, which is still, poor, backward town, and then being in New York just 10 years later in the center of kind of politics. And these two worlds that he had, one where he's working, wearing Burmese clothes, no electricity, eating Burmese food, probably on the floor. And then the second, being in the dining room, hosting Jackie Kennedy, smoking a cigar, wearing custom-made suits from Saks or from Brooks Brothers at the time, and how he was able to make that jump even in his own mind. Having said that, I think it was a time when, a lot of the colonial empires were coming to a close. There were a lot of men and women who kind of had to live in different worlds. And in that time, being a school teacher, having an education, teaching school was actually a really privileged thing. And I think they felt a responsibility to kind of help lead their countries forward after independence as well. But, more specifically on the things that he liked, I had a good time, maybe not a good time, but an interesting time looking through 10 years of catering records at the UN to see what he was eating and drinking with all these different people. And also finding out what he was watching on TV, which I was able to find out as well. So he loved the Ed Sullivan Show every Sunday night.
Run a big shoe tonight, run a big shoe.
And towards the end, it was a lot of Johnny Carson and all these things. But at the end, it was also Columbo, which became a favorite TV show. And then All in the Family towards the end, like in 71, 72, the end as well.
Because it seemed like he loved to laugh. Even with Columbo was based on a lot of humor.
Yeah.
Right? Peter Falk. One more thing. And I would think that makes total sense. I don't want my Secretary General of the UN watching Breaking Bad. I don't need you doing that.
No, you're absolutely.
I need there to be some mirth in your life.
Because he said at the end, when they asked him in this press conference, what do you think your successor should be? So he said all these things, person of integrity and all of that, and committed to individual human dignity. But he also said it has to be someone with a sense of humor and a sense of the absurd, because that's what it's going to take to really survive through this job.
Can you believe he took the job after Dag Hammarskjöld? I mean, listen, okay, he was killed. That's my take.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take.
My take
it was
as well.
A political assassination, right? In the Congo, an airplane. Yeah, look it up, kids. Look it up. It's a little sketchy.
Yeah.
The idea that, even if he was the quote compromise candidate, because you're in the middle of the Cold War, you got the U.S., you got Russia, and it's not like today when we're all such close friends. It was even, on steroids. And the fact that they decided, we'll pick this guy, from a small Asian country, from a quote third world country, and he'll be that broker. I don't know. To me, there's part of it that they thought, we can push this guy around.
Exactly. I'm sure that's right.
And
then think of, the rest of the 60s. Think of all the people he knew in different ways that were knocked off one after the other. I mean, not just John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, but people in the Third World and Lumumba himself and other people who were killed during that time. It was a time of political assassinations. I found actually right after he became Secretary General, so within a few weeks, I don't think I included this in his book, I found a note or a letter back to his brother in Burma, asking if he could suggest a very senior Burmese policeman who could come to be his security person in New York, which means that he didn't trust even the UN security establishment necessarily, because he wasn't sure who to trust and what was going on at that time when he took the job.
That's crazy. I mean, can you imagine living in that situation where you don't trust the United Nations, you don't trust the host country,
Yeah.
right? And so, and listen, United Nations in New York, put it in Moscow, and it's the same situation, maybe even more. Put it anywhere. Put it in Paris. Put it in Mumbai. It's all the same thing. And you're right. And it almost feels like we're back in the age of political assassinations. I
Well,
mean, you look around
hopefully
the
not.
world.
Hopefully not.
But I'm saying you look around the world, not just the United States, but around the world, and you're seeing a lot of questionable deaths among political opponents.
Yeah, and this is what,
right?
what I kind of learned in writing this book, which is that I read some, I read all these documents and did all this research, and some of the stuff looks eerily similar, right? Big power conflicts, big personalities on the world stage. There's a Security Council meeting on a crisis in the Middle East. There's some other invasion that people don't know how to deal with. So lots of similarities, lots of stuff happening at the UN. The big difference is that in those days, the UN had a lot of prestige, a lot of weight. And there was this person, whether it was Hammarskjöld before, U Thant in the 60s, that was seen by all sides as this neutral arbiter. And this person who not only was the kind of top UN person, but was on a daily basis speaking to world leaders, going off and speaking to the Soviet leader, to John F. Kennedy or Lyndon Johnson, to Charles de Gaulle, to whoever. And we miss that person. We don't have that person who has listened to everyone and who can try to come up with formulas that might make sense in different situations.
I think it was and I'm glad that you're getting some spotlight, or giving flowers, as the kids say, to your grandfather, because I think that was the golden age of the UN. Of course, you don't realize it when you're going through it, right? Nobody realizes. Most people don't really realize when they're having a good day or a bad day until, it's the old historian joke. What do you think about the French Revolution? Too soon. uh, and it's looking back on it now, because it did become more and more agenda driven. Right? I don't think anybody can deny that. Again, maybe wrong. But back then, there was more of a, hey, we're just trying to get the world through today.
I think what happened was, you're right, and I think what happened was, the UN in the beginning, if you go back to when it was first conceived by Roosevelt and some of the people around him in 1943, 44, so while the war is still on, their idea was that after the war, we have to have something different, right? And they thought the UN is going to be this muscular enforcement mechanism. The US, the Russians, the British together would police the world, make sure the Germans and the Japanese never came up again, and deal with any little aggressors that might pop up, right? And Roosevelt had these wacky ideas. He wanted the UN to be headquartered in a northern island in Hawaii, for example. Then he thought of the Black Hills in South Dakota. So there were all these different ideas at the time. But of course, none of that came to fruition because of the Cold War, right? So even in 1946, 47, people are saying, the UN is not fit for purpose. It needs to be reformed. Maybe it's not going to work anymore. And it wasn't until the mid to late 1950s, so the Hammarskjöld time, when the Secretary General of the UN became this mediator, this person, when the Security Council was deadlocked then as now, that everyone could trust and could use in different situations. And he was fueled, that person, my grandfather as well, was fueled by all this energy coming from these newly independent countries in Asia and Africa that really wanted the UN to work, because for them, guaranteeing their independence required the successful UN and this new international system.
It is wild to think about how many different scenarios unfolded, right? And going through that. And when you do have what they try to be is neutral. It's hard to be neutral. We all bring our own biases. We all bring our own stories. But I think the only thing anybody really wants, and you learn it as a child, we just want fair. Right? My son plays sports, and he was going, well, the ref wasn't calling any of the holding calls. And I'm like, well, here's the good news. He was calling them on you guys either. Right? And as long as they're not calling anything, well, then that's fair. Right? And it's asking for that fair approach, fair in coverage, fair in reporting, fair in everything. And that's what I felt reading the book, that your grandfather tried to do. He tried to be as fair, wasn't always successful as he would want to be, didn't make always the right decisions. By the way, how hard was that to sit back and report on his flaws? And how did your family deal with that? How did they react to it?
I'm with Mike and Brenda Council with another real Mike Council plumbing and rooter story. Let's talk about the early days. What was it like?
Well, when we first started, the phone was by the bed.
So just the two of you?
Exactly.
And I would answer the emergency calls in the middle of the night. I'd wake up and answer them.
2:00, I'm headed out the door.
So 30 years ago.
30 years and 6 months.
But I hear Mike Council Plumbing might have had its beginnings when you were, what, a kid?
Yeah, I grew up in a little one-room shack, and we had an outhouse out back.
An outhouse?
That's correct.
Oh, my.
And ended up with a great appreciation for indoor plumbing.
I guess. And when you finally got it?
It was a great day.
Since 1993, the people of San Jose and the South Bay have trusted Mike Council Plumbing and Rooter for all their plumbing needs. From emergencies like a drain backup or water leak, maybe you need a new water heater or fixture installed, a gas appliance hooked up. Give Mike Council a call at 408-217-1002 or go to mcplumbing.com, an official partner of the San Jose Sharks.
You're in clean hands with Mike Council Plumbing and Rooter.
Well, I mean, first going back to what you said, I mean, it's fair, and it's also what you said before. I think he turned out to be someone that no one could push around. And so the Americans, even LBJ and his people thought, okay, we don't agree with him a lot, and we're having trouble because we can't push him around. But it also means the Russians can't push him around. And that's better than, someone we can push around, which means somebody else might be pushing him around as well, right? So there's that factor. But yeah, I mean, in terms of trying to be objective, I kind of went back and forth. Sometimes I thought, okay, I'm being too empathetic. I'm being too favorable. So I was trying to dig up stuff, looking at the flaws, thinking he must have made a mistake here. This must have been a disaster. And then at some points I would catch myself and feel I'm being too critical and then kind of swing the other way. So I went back and forth, and I hope I landed in my book in a way that's fair to him. That's empathetic. It's his perspective to some extent, but it's also a real account. I didn't depend on anything other than what's in the archive. So anyone can go back and check what's there and then find out, if I'm looking at the full picture or not.
I don't know when, I can say that. In my opinion, in the last 10 years, describing someone as a man of their time has become a slur. I don't think it is fair at all, right? And we'll be held to the same things. I mean, instead of 100 years from now going, yeah, man of his time, hell, you can't make it to next Thursday, right? And go, yeah, well, we've changed our thoughts on that. Now that's all different. And we've seen all that. And I thought your portrayal of your grandfather, he was a man of his time. I love, as I said, I highlighted the story when his goodbye dinner, when he's having a cigar and hanging out with the rich and famous. Here's this poor kid from Burma. That's the man of their time, right? And his attitudes toward that, were they perfect? No. And we're not either. We're not going to be viewed as perfect 50, 100 years from now. They're going to sit back and go, wait, you thought that was a good idea? I thought it was fair in the way you portrayed him that way.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, I think you're absolutely right that I think he had a real sense, and maybe this is because he's from this ex-colonial country, so he had a sense of that. He comes into the West, he really absorbs it. He has so many friends in America, but also in Britain and elsewhere. He's listening to all these people from around the world. He's traveling a lot. I think he had a real sense of the historical moment he was in the early 60s when he took this job, and then he rode that wave as best he could. And did the most he could with that job. And in a way, he was kind of the last man standing. There was a period, this Bandung conference when the Asian and African countries met for the first time. They had this vision, they had this ambition. A lot of these guys were knocked off in coups. A lot of them were assassinated. Some of them became really radical, people like Ho Chi Minh or Fidel Castro in Havana. In a way, he was, in 1972, the last man standing from that group that really stood for a kind of a vision of the world that he brought to the UN. At that time. And, you can't compare it with the UN later on, or certainly not today. It's a completely different organization. But for that time, I think he did the most he could with that job that he had.
Well, if you think about how hard it is, it's like, I don't know if you're a sports fan, but like the NFL, right? You have the NFL commissioner who serves at the behest of the owners of the teams. So if the owners, who are the people funding it, say, no, we don't want it that way. It doesn't matter what the players want. The owners, yeah. And the UN is pretty much set up the same way. I mean, you got the veto-powered population, and if Russia doesn't like it, or if the US doesn't like it, well, that's done. crazy how hard it is.
But that's why. I mean, this not the secret sauce, but the ingredient that's so important in that job is political courage. If you sit around waiting for what the big powers are going to agree on and tell you to do, you're going to be sitting around waiting forever, and the war will be finished. Another million people will be dead, right? So in the Cuban Missile Crisis, but in many other situations, he just had to jump in, or he had to kind of fudge it. So in the Congo, for example, he had his troops there. They were pushing up against these Katanga mercenary forces. And it's a complicated story. People can read about it in the book. It's a fascinating thing. It's the one time the UN had an army of Irish guys, Swedish guys, Ghanaian guys, Indian guys fighting these mercenaries. And he came under tremendous pressure from the British and the Belgians in particular to kind of back off or not go hard. And at this crucial time when this Indian armored brigade was about to cross this river and kind of finish the conflict, he was under this pressure. And he was told to send this message out for these guys not to cross that bridge, not to cross that river. And just miraculously, the communications broke down between him and his guys. So they did cross the river. They took out these guys. They destroyed the last holdout, and the conflict was finished. So you have to, you have to take risks, and you have to it's not bending the rules. You have to find creative ways to use the job, because it is a unique job, the head of the UN.
Well, it is such an unanswerable question. And I've done my research on you and stuff. And when people ask you, what do you think he would have made about the something today? And I'm like, that is so unfair, right? And we all think that we're in the worst time ever.
Yeah.
We all think we're in the end times. And it's like, if you don't have a sense of history,
that's right.
Our things are hard today. But when you're talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were literally 24 hours from a nuclear war.
Yeah.
And there's been so many, Ukraine and Russia, Poland, Czechoslovakia, we've had this before, and we forget. We're doing those doomed forget history are doomed to repeat it. And it's these things will happen, and they will happen again in the future.
Yeah.
My take is not his. My take is your take, because you're a historian. And you did all the research. You've really delved into this. It is, what is the role of the UN now? What can they even do? Can we ever return it to its glory? The League of Nations didn't work either with Woodrow Wilson, right? What can it do?
Yeah, I would say it's two answers. One is, I think we have to respect the understanding of the men and women who created the UN in 1945, who in their adult lifetimes had lived through 2 world wars that killed 80 million people and saw a Great Depression in between. And they thought,
forget that, don't we?
And we thought we just cannot go back to the old ways. We have to find something different, right? So I think we have to respect that feeling. And what they meant by that is, the old ways of the 19th century, early 20th century of empires, spheres of influence, great power politics, deals, all these kinds of things. Okay, they've had their day, but in the atomic age, when we can blow up the world many times over, let's at least try something different. So they created the UN, right? So we have to respect that and remember that in the back of our mind. I think the problem with the UN right now is that it's gone in so many different directions. It tries to do all things. It tries to be all things to all people. It has these sprawling bureaucracies. To some extent, being a talk shop where countries from all over the world come and try to do that's fine, right? That doesn't really cost too much. But I think we have to now, with 80 years of history, have a much more kind of rigorous understanding of what the UN actually does well and what it doesn't do well, right? So we don't have to fund everything. I think we have to think about what is the comparative advantage of an organization in which the Russians belong, as well as the Chinese, as well as the Americans. And what can we use that organization for? That doesn't have to do everything in the world. It's something very special. And I kind of think it is that Cuban Missile Crisis moment. We need that organization as the fallback for that kind of time when everything else is stuck and we want to avoid World War III. And we want an organization that can prevent wars and end wars and de-escalate conflicts like the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that doesn't actually cost anything. It means having the right person in that job with a team of maybe 50, 100 people, right? So the rest of the UN, there can be good elements, bad elements. I think we should look at that in a rigorous way. But I think we should preserve that peace element and make sure next year when we have to choose a new Secretary General that it's the right person.
Yeah, it is. It seems like there's a lot of fat to be trimmed. right? It seems like when I look at the UN, the only time I hear stories about it is when they're having somebody come talk about when you have an actor's kids talk to the UN about you should make us everybody wear face mask again. Now, okay, you can have that debate at the UN. At the UN, really? That's what we're going to do now? And that's the stuff where when it takes away the power. It takes away what you can be doing, because you're right. I mean, do they even use the word peacekeeping force anymore?
Yeah, they have so few peacekeeping forces left in Africa, but they're almost all being, sort of rolled up, and they have none of the effectiveness of the old peacekeeping forces. And you're right. I mean, the UN shouldn't be an NGO. It shouldn't be like an NGO or an activist group talking about everything. I think if governments want to come and give speeches and talk about the issues that are important to them, we should have a forum where every government of the world can come and do things and say things and meet up in New York. That's absolutely fine. And again, with the rest, there are good bits and bad bits. I mean, there are bits of the UN, specialized agencies that are making sure that, air traffic around the world is properly coordinated, or making sure there are, letters and stuff, or, the old postal union letters are going back and forth around the world in the right way. There are bits on world health. There are bits on, other things, and people can look at that. And I'm sure I'm absolutely sure there are bits that can be, many big parts that can be trimmed in terms of bureaucracy, especially. But that's different from thinking about how the UN can be important politically, and how governments might have to reinvest a little bit to make sure that we have enough prestige and weight at the UN that when you need the UN, it's there for these key issues around war and peace. I mean, Conor Cruise O'Brien, who is an Irish historian and scholar, said back in the late 60s, he said, look, there are many wars around the world which can be dealt with without the UN. They can be dealt with by a government that's negotiating, or a regional organization, or whatever else. But every now and then you need someone called the Secretary General of the UN to de-escalate a conflict. He was thinking of the Cuban Missile Crisis. You need that person in the cupboard that you can draw out. And everything else the UN does, and it goes back to your point, it shouldn't have mindless, endless conversations. That it should be this prestigious body that has legitimacy, that people admire and respect. And everything about the UN should be about maintaining that authority of the Secretary General. So when you need him, maybe on the brink of a nuclear war, that person is there. I think that still holds true today.
Wow, I could not agree more. It boils down to, as superficial as this sounds, it's a branding problem, right? Their brand has gotten so off base. And I agree with you. We need it to be something. We need the UN to be the adults in the room.
Absolutely.
Is what we need.
Yeah.
And right now, there's parts of the UN that seems like they're the kids on Twitter or on TikTok, right? And it's like, yeah, that's fun. And if you want to pour something over your head and think that's funny, yeah. But I need the adults in the room now, because we have things that need to be taken care of. It was such a fascinating journey for me to, first of all, learn about U Thant and his ability. And I don't have much time left, but here's what I got. I just felt like he was a really nice guy. That he was just a really pragmatic, and maybe it was the Buddhism, whatever, but he just had that, from what I took, calm.
Yeah. He was
one of
calm,
those guys that
and he liked
the
people.
temperature.
He liked people. He liked being around people. And I think people felt that. He was a good listener. My mother told me a story that when her parents, in this old town in Burma, they would try to go for a walk after dinner every evening. And my grandfather would never get past the third house because he liked to just chat with the neighbors and catch up with them. He brought that feeling to New York when he was talking to diplomats. I think he was just good in that way. Sometimes when you see him on old videos, he's very stoic. He doesn't show much emotion. But that's because I kind of think, being an outsider, being a person of color in New York at that time, he wanted people to take him seriously. But at home, he was different. And with friends, he was different. With my grandmother, he was playing pranks on her all the time at home. So I think he was a funny, fun person. And maybe that came out in a lot of these one-to-one kind of, discussions and encounters that people had. But he was also respectful. I think one thing that's always really important for me when I see different people is how well they treat like the very junior staff. And I think for him, whether it was his security people, the secretaries, or anyone, I think he treated everyone equally. I know that from their own memoirs and everything else. And I think that makes a big difference in terms of, how you think about a person as well.
Yeah, because there's a lot of video out there now of politicians behaving
Yeah.
against their own staff.
Yeah.
Against their own staff. I mean, it's crazy. Thought this has been fascinating, and I've been looking forward to it. And I could go on for hours because I'm a history buff, but I don't have enough intelligence.
People can read the book.
And the links are here. The links, you can order the book, Peacemaker, everything. I have enjoyed it, and hey, thank you for
Great.
sharing
Thank
it,
you.
and good luck with this.
Okay. Wonderful. Thanks for having me.